Hey friends, welcome to Unpacking the Mass. I'm so glad you are here. Today we're looking at the readings for the third Sunday in Easter. Incredible stuff today. We're going to be seeing how the early church continues in its ministry despite all of the obstacles, all of the ways the world tries to destroy it. And we're going to see how specifically Peter moves from a guy who is completely devastated by his rejection of Jesus and his betrayal of Jesus, standing around a charcoal fire, to his restoration by Jesus, standing around a charcoal fire, my friends. It's powerful stuff. We're going to jump right in with our first reading from the book of Acts. And I want you to remember, like, the backdrop of all of this. You know, Jesus has risen from the dead. And imagine Peter has gone through this incredible experience. We're sort of going backwards in the linear order of things, time-wise, with this reading, but I think it's super cool anyway. So let's look at Acts chapter 5, our first reading. When the captain and the court officers had brought in the apostles and made them stand before the Sanhedrin, the high priest questioned them. "We gave you strict orders, did we not, to stop teaching in that name? Yet you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching and want to bring this man's blood upon us." But Peter and the apostles said in reply, "We must obey God rather than men. The God of our ancestors raised Jesus, though you had him killed by hanging him on a tree. God exalted him at his right hand as leader and savior to grant Israel repentance and forgiveness of sins. We are witnesses of these things, as is the Holy Spirit, whom God has given to those who obey him." The Sanhedrin ordered the apostles to stop speaking in the name of Jesus and dismiss them. So they left the presence of the Sanhedrin, rejoicing that they had been found worthy to suffer dishonor for the sake of the name. So imagine, I mean, you've seen in the book of Acts, obviously, the disciples gathered there in the upper room in Acts chapter 2. The power of the Holy Spirit comes upon them, tongues of fire, preaching the gospel, church is growing. And they were once, if you remember back from John chapter 20, they're huddled together for fear of the Jews. They don't know what's going to happen. And now, after the power of the Holy Spirit has come upon them, they have no more fear, my friends. They're preaching boldly and mightily. And of course, it's remarkable that these religious leaders are so offended by this. They killed Jesus. And I'm sure in their minds, this whole Christianity thing was done. I mean, they killed Jesus, but the problem was Jesus rose from the dead. That was kind of inconvenient for their squashing out of this faith. And now these disciples just won't shut up about it. They just can't be stopped. And no matter how much they're threatened, no matter what happens to them, no matter what is done, they continue to preach. And I'm sure the Sanhedrin were horrified, because these are men that had so much power over Jews. I mean, they exercised their religious authority. You know, they lorded it over them, and they put heavy burdens on those who wanted to follow God, yet they themselves didn't lift a finger to help. And they did what they thought they had to do to squash this whole movement of Jesus. And now here are these same men who were horrified and scared and terrified not that long ago. Now they won't shut up about it. And Peter, of course, throws it right in their face. And these guys can't understand it. And I love this. I mean, you can sum this whole thing up with this whole thing where Peter says, "We must obey God rather than men." I mean, that's the bottom line. If you want to follow Jesus, if you want to be a Christian in a world like the world that they lived in, and in a world like the world we live in, this has to be your moniker. We must follow God rather than men. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just do whatever you want and break all the laws and do whatever. These weren't civil laws that, like St. Paul tells us, to obey the laws of the land. These were religious laws. And we are not to obey the religious laws of men. We are to obey the religious laws of God. Now, it's funny that, Catholics, we always get accused all the time of, man-made doctrines and all that kind of stuff. It's really funny to me how the faith that we follow is the same faith passed down from Peter and the apostles. Okay, our theology and belief is right in line with theirs, whereas many of the groups that accuse us and people that accuse us of following man-made traditions, their faith tradition didn't even exist until some man created it just a few hundred years ago, and in some cases, not even that long ago, right? I mean, if you look back at the history of Christianity and you ask yourself the question, if any of these apostles, if any of the church fathers were to come into our churches to preach a message today, would they be received by us with their theology about Jesus Christ and the Eucharist, for example? Would that be received? Would it be received, their ecclesiology and their structure of church governance with the bishops and of course, Peter as the head of the church? Would that be received? Friends, and I don't want to get too far off track. I'm just saying, look, we must obey God rather than men. And that's the truth that we cling to as well. So these disciples aren't worked up about what can happen to them. As a matter of fact, I love how it says here, they left the presence of the Sanhedrin, rejoicing that they had been found worthy to suffer dishonor for the sake of the name. Now, I don't know about you. I struggle with that part of it right there. Because I will say that, and I'm no martyr, but I have suffered for the sake of the name of Christ in my life. I have. Nowhere near what the apostles have suffered. But when that happens, I find myself struggling to rejoice. Can you relate to that? Oftentimes I endure those things, and sometimes I endure them with impatience, and I can kind of be a whiner about it sometimes. Maybe you can relate. I don't always count myself, as one who's rejoicing because I've been found to be worthy of it. That makes it sound like to be found worthy to suffer dishonor for the sake of Christ is a privilege. And it is. That's a truth we need to grasp, my brothers and sisters. When we suffer for the sake of Christ, that is a privilege. Jesus says, you're blessed. Remember what he said in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, blessed are you when men falsely say things about you, when you're persecuted, and all these things, people lie about you. For your reward is great in that day. Like we're blessed when we're reviled by this world, when people falsely accuse us, when we're excluded, when we're lied. And I'm telling you, if you live your life as a bold on fire for Christ person, that's going to happen. And if it hasn't ever happened, then I would ask you to look a little bit deeper into your faith and into the practice of your faith to see, maybe I'm just not bold enough. Maybe I'm just not out there enough as a believer. Maybe I've fallen into this trap of keeping my faith private to myself so that nobody knows about it. And I'm not saying you have to grab a bullhorn and go out and start yelling at people and all that. But what I am saying is there should be no doubt people that know you should know to whom you belong. And when that happens, you can expect there will be times that you will suffer. But if you're going to be like Jesus and like the disciples, when that happens, you don't throw a fit, cry, and whine. You rejoice and count yourself worthy. That's a pretty powerful message. Okay, let's look at our responsorial psalm. I will praise you, Lord, for you have rescued me. This is Psalm 30. I will extol you, O Lord, for you drew me clear and did not let my enemies rejoice over me. O Lord, you brought me up from the netherworld. You preserved me from among those going down into the pit. I will praise you, Lord, for you have rescued me. Sing praise to the Lord, you his faithful ones, and give thanks to his holy name. For his anger lasts but a moment, a lifetime his goodwill. At nightfall, weeping enters in, but with dawn, rejoicing. I will praise you, Lord, for you have rescued me. Hear, O Lord, and have pity on me. O Lord, be my helper. You changed my mourning into dancing. O Lord, my God, forever I give you thanks. I will praise you, Lord, for you have rescued me. Oh, that text there where it says, at nightfall, weeping enters in, but with dawn, rejoicing. So any of you guys remember that song, Trading My Sorrows, I don't know if you sang that in Catholic Church. We sing that in Protestant church all the time. Though the sorrow may last for the night, the joy comes in the morning. Yeah, okay, I'm trading my sorrows. I love reading those things in the Psalms and the worship of that, because it's true, friends. We trade in our sorrows for joy, even when we suffer. It's not to say we never have those sorrows, but we will trade them for joy. And when enemies come against us, when people want to destroy us and attack us, we take heart in the fact that God will preserve us. It doesn't mean we avoid those things, but ultimately in the end, we will be drawn close to the Lord and preserved by God from those going down. like those going down to the pit. I will praise you, Lord, for you have rescued me. Has he rescued you, my friend? He has. Be rescued then, right? Be rescued. Live as one who has been rescued. All right, let's take a look at Revelation chapter 5. I love what we're doing this. Acts, Revelation, gospel, boom. This is awesome stuff. John writes these words. He says, I, John, looked and heard the voices of many angels who surrounded the throne and the living creatures and the elders. This is church up in heaven. All right. They were countless in number, and they cried out in a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches, wisdom and strength, honor and glory and blessing. Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea, everything in the universe cry out to the one who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor, glory and might forever and ever. The four living creatures answered, Amen. And the elders fell down and worship. Friends, this is going to be some incredible worship in heaven. This is, the idea is this, that God is sovereign. God is over all. And in the end, everyone and everything will worship our God, the Lamb who was slain, my friends. Powerful stuff. Everything in the universe cries out. So when you feel like you're on an island by yourself because you worship Jesus and you feel isolated and alone, like nobody gets you, know this, there's a day coming when all of creation will cry out in praise and worship the Lord Jesus, friends. Oh, that's just incredible to recognize. Alleluia, alleluia. Christ is risen, creator of all. He has shown pity on all people. Alleluia, alleluia. All right, our gospel comes from John chapter 21, verses 1 through 19. This is awesome stuff right here. Remember last week, John chapter 20, Jesus appearing to the disciples there and giving them this mandate to forgive sins. Well, now here's another appearance that the Lord has with his apostles. It says, at that time, Jesus revealed himself again to his disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. He revealed himself in this way. Together were Simon Peter, Thomas, called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, Zebedee's sons, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we also will come with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. When it was already dawn, Jesus was standing on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, have you caught anything to eat? They answered him, no. So he said to them, cast the net over the right side of the boat, and you will find something. So they cast it and were not able to pull it in because of the number of fish. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Yeah, check this out. So the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he tucked in his garment, for he was lightly clad, and jumped into the sea. This sounds familiar too, doesn't it? Peter jumping out of the water to go towards Jesus. The other disciples came in the boat, for they were not far from the shore, only about 100 yards, dragging the net with the fish. When they climbed out on the shore, they saw a charcoal fire with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you just caught. So Simon Peter went over and dragged the net ashore, full of 153 large fish. Even though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come, have breakfast. And none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Because they realized it was the Lord. Jesus came over and took the bread and gave it to them, and in like manner the fish. This was now the third time Jesus was revealed to his disciples after being raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Simon Peter answered him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my lambs. He then said to Simon Peter a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Simon Peter answered him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. Jesus said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was distressed that Jesus had said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Amen, amen. I say to you, when you were younger, you used to dress yourself and go where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. He said this, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he had said this, he said to him, follow me. Oh man, so much to unpack in this. Let's talk first about this appearance, this miraculous catch of fish. Does this sound familiar to anybody? It does, I'm sure, because it should, because we've seen miraculous catch of fish in other places, like in Luke, where the disciples, Peter and James and John, they can't catch anything all night long. And then Jesus says, try it again. They do. And what happens? They catch so much fish, their nets begin to split. They can't haul it in. And Jesus says, if you follow me, you'll become fishers of men. So at the beginning of their calling into ministry, to be with Jesus, they have a miraculous catch of fish that's so much that they can't contain it. And like everything's falling apart, like it's overflowing. So that is called to mind here. The other thing that's called to mind is Peter's response, because ultimately this is really going to be about Peter. It's interesting that Peter, once again, jumps out of the boat, just like we saw when Peter walks on the water. When he recognizes Jesus, okay, he jumps out of the boat and starts heading toward Jesus. I think that that's pretty interesting, don't you? All right. He hears that it's the Lord, and he tucks in his garment and he just jumps to go towards Jesus. And I think that that's pretty awesome. Now, I think what else is interesting is when they tried to bring the fish above, they were not able to pull it in. So the net's still in the water. Peter jumps in the water, and it says he went over and dragged the net ashore by himself. Now, none of this is by accident, my friends. And I think, there's a chapter in Joe's book, Joe Heschmeyer's book, Pope Peter, all about this. This is actually, Joe calls it the third miraculous catch, because he talks about in Matthew 17 when Jesus and Peter have this moment where Jesus tells Peter to go out for a catch to find the coin in the fish's mouth. That's the second miraculous catch. Joe talks about this as the third miraculous catch, and he highlights the Peter-centric nature of this catch, how Jesus is setting this up. And Joe didn't invent that. He's quoting the church fathers here. He's talking about how this was understood by different people. St. Cyril of Alexandria, for example, looked at this as a sign of the work of Christ, who gathers the multitude of the saved by his own power into the apostolic net, as it were, the church on earth. And this net doesn't break, meaning that under Peter's authority, that there will be a large catch. Peter is going to bring them in, right? And the net's not going to break. But I think what else is interesting is that when Jesus is there appearing on the shore, and Joe talks about this too, Jesus already has fish. Like, Jesus wasn't standing there going, hey guys, I'm really hungry, bring me some fish. Yes, he said, bring some of the fish you just caught, but what was already there? There was already fish. So Jesus already had fish. Jesus lets us add to the work that he is doing. And I think that that's pretty significant. Now, some scholars try to figure out what this 153 large fish means. I looked around, I couldn't find anybody who could definitively say what was significant about that number. Some people, like Augustine, has some weird 17 of 17, but that's just speculation. But I think it's interesting that John gives us all of these details. And I'm sure there's some meaning somewhere. Maybe if you can leave it in the comments for me. But I think that this is so powerful. And then right after this, of course, you have this restoration of Peter. Let's talk a little bit more about this. Why is it significant that there's a charcoal fire? I think it's significant because there's a fire also where Peter denies the Lord right after the Garden of Gethsemane. And if you remember that story, right after they lead out of the garden, they take him to Caiaphas' house, and Peter is kind of there warming himself around what? A fire. This is being set up to be Peter's restoration. Now, remember what Jesus says about Peter. He said, Satan has demanded to sift you all, to all the apostles, but I have prayed for you, Peter. That language there is singular, that your faith may not fail. And when you have been restored, strengthen your brethren. Well, we're about to see that moment. So what Jesus does here is he basically has this new version of that question that is asked to Peter, do you love me? Right now, when Peter is asked outside of the high priest place, do you know Jesus? Are you one of his disciples? No. 3 times he denies it. And each one of those denials is a little bit more passionate, a little more emphatic. And, as soon as Peter locks eyes with Jesus after the cock crows in the morning, Peter runs out and weeps bitterly. And, now we have this opportunity for restoration. And before I talk more about that with Peter's situation, I want to ask you about your situation. Have you ever had a situation in your life where you denied the Lord in some way? and you just felt so terrible about it, and you've wrestled with guilt so long for so in such a harsh way, and you need to be restored, right? You've needed to feel that way. I've been there, my friends. And I can tell you this, that your love for the Lord will grow in such a deep, profound way when you've had that experience of the great mercy of God in a restorative way. You know, like Jesus said that to the one who has been forgiven much loves much. I think that's why Peter in Acts, we're able to see, is able to stand up boldly and mightily and declare the truth about Jesus no matter what's going to happen to him. And then Jesus, of course, even says to him at the end of this passage, there's a day coming where you're going to be led away. Your arms are going to be outstretched, right? Of course, talking about the way he would die, which would be crucifixion, as we all know. But yet, if you look at that, Peter doesn't hear that and go, oh, you know, may it not be. Kind of like, remember when Jesus talked about how he must be delivered unto men and be crucified and delivered under death? And Peter, right in Matthew 16, was like, Lord, no way. And that's when Jesus says to Peter, get behind me, Satan, for you are not on the side of God, but of men. Peter's been through a lot, hasn't he? And what he recognizes is that trying to save your own skin is not always God's path for you. And it wasn't God's path for Jesus. And now Peter got that. And now when Jesus says, Peter, it's not going to be my path for you either. You're going to give up your life because of what you do for me. And Peter doesn't understand everything about it, but he certainly knows what he's talking about. And when he's face to face with that in the book of Acts and beyond, he does not shy away from it. He says, I must obey God rather than men. I'm not afraid of you guys. I'm not afraid of what you can do to me. And that was the power that the early church had that we miss out on, friends, because we're so worried about our own skin. We're so worried about our own possessions. We're so worried about our own security that we deny the Lord over and over and over again just so we won't offend people, just so we won't have to sacrifice. And it's a problem. The Catholic Church could transform the world just like that. I believe if we could own this type of mentality in a more powerful way, and I'm not just going to be like, yeah, if only the bishops were more courageous. Yes, they should be. But you know what? We need to be more courageous too. And, you know, that goes double for me. We all need to stand up for our faith more and be willing to lay ourselves on the line, our reputations, our lives, our possessions, our whatever, on the line for the Lord. And we do that. I think we're more inclined to do that when we recognize the restorative power of the mercy of God. And that's what we see happening here. And I love the way John gives us this parallel experience, you know, because I'm sure he picked up on it, right? Do you love me more than these? And each time Simon answers, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus doesn't just go, well, that's nice. He says, okay, feed my lambs. Feed my sheep, right? This is instruction to Peter. People are like, oh, well, Peter wasn't the Pope. You know, well, first of all, get Joe's book again. I know I sound like a fanboy here. I kind of am. Pope Peter's all about the scriptural witness and the doctrine of how Peter was distinct as the leader. And that's a powerful thing for us to understand, right? Jesus set it up that way. It wasn't like he said, hey, you know what would be cool if I could make myself leader? No, Jesus made him leader. And this is where we see this, friends, among other places. So we need to look at that. And we also need to see how Jesus doesn't hold a grudge against Simon Peter. I mean, there were other disciples that didn't deny him in the same way. Why didn't John get to be the leader? You know, John was right there with him at the foot of the cross. John is called the disciple whom Jesus loved. You know, why wasn't John chosen to lead the church, to be the one to whom the keys were given? Now, he was a leader in the church. I don't mean to say he wasn't. You know, all of the apostles were leaders of the church. They were all given authority. But Peter, as the head, my friends, to whom the Lord said, feed my sheep. And that's not just some sort of like nice little neat, oh, just be nice to people. No, this is like a command of the Lord. Be the one who drags in the fish. The net will not tear. That's a symbolic picture, friends, of the gates of hell not prevailing against the church. It's powerful, friends. We need to keep that in mind. God is a God of restoration. He's a God of restoration and healing. But notice what that's all about. He didn't say to Peter, all right, are you ready for this? Are you strong enough? Did you listen to what I said enough? Have you rehearsed your sermons enough? Have you exercised enough? Have you worked on your fasting? And did you memorize all those prayers enough? No. What did he ask him? Do you love me? Do you love me? You see, that's what matters. It doesn't mean the other stuff doesn't matter, but that's what's critical and crucial to living the Christian life, to restoration, to leadership, to catching men, to the apostolic ministry, and to being part of his church. Friends, anything that the Lord has called us to do, we are restored unto a loving relationship with Jesus. He's a lot less worried about how awesome you are. He's a lot more worried about, do you love him? Think about that. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to be good at all this ministry stuff, trying to figure out how to make good videos and good podcast episodes and write good talks and help people through good advice or whatever. I work on that a lot. And I think that that's good. But sometimes the Lord convicts me and says, Keith, that's all fine and good. But what matters more than anything is, do you love me? Do you love me? And you know what, guys? There was a part of my life when I was in ministry so obsessed with worldly success in that. And I know you might think, seriously, yeah. How many kids do we have coming to our youth group? Are we the biggest? Are we better than everybody else in town? Right? Are we growing? Are we seen as, successful? All these things. It's easy to get wrapped up in that. And there was a time in my life when I spent very little time thinking about, do I love Jesus? But I spent an awful lot of time thinking about, what do I need to do to be better? And it wasn't for him. Honestly, sometimes it was for me. It didn't start that way, but that's what can happen to us, friends. And I think that that's a danger that we all have to deal with. Sometimes in our faith, we get so worked up on our own practice of things and we put ourselves at the center. And what we fail to recognize is what Jesus is asking of us really isn't that complicated. Boy, we sure do make it complicated, don't we? What he's asking us ultimately is to love him. Because if we love him, remember what he said, if you love me, you will keep my commands. Not keep my commands to prove that you love me. That's not what he said. That's how a lot of us live in our faith, though, isn't it? What he said was, if you love me, you'll keep my commands. Think about how beautiful that is. Because if you truly love him, if he's first in your life, if your heart belongs to him, then you're not going to chase after the garbage of this world. You're not going to give the devil a foothold in your life. You're not going to make provision for the flesh. You're not going to put yourself first. You're going to put him first. And that's where it all flows together, my friends. And I know we know that, but let's face it, a lot of us have failed. We've all failed. We've all failed. Aren't you thankful that we have this picture of restoration? Peter failed. Okay. I love that Jesus picked him. Maybe that's why Jesus picked him, because he failed and he could restore him. It wouldn't surprise me, because I need a guy like Peter in my life. I need to look at a guy and go, wow, this is the leader. Okay. Yeah. He's passionate, but he's an idiot sometimes, and I can kind of see myself in that. And yet he was able to, by loving Jesus enough, overcome those past mistakes, overcome those weaknesses that he has, and be used by God in a mighty way to pull in a miraculous catch, and the net doesn't break. Friend, I don't know. That's just my thought on this today. I hope that it's been helpful to you. And I wonder what your priest will do with it on Sunday when you go to Mass. It's probably going to be way more brilliant than what I've talked about, but I think it's good to have these things in our minds. So friends, thank you so much for joining me here on Unpacking the Mass. It's truly a privilege to study the Word of God with all of you. Again, if this is helpful, please make sure that you share this video, like this video, and invite someone to jump in with you next week as we continue to walk through the readings for Mass. Take care, my friends, and God bless.